You're not breaking down. You're not crying in the middle of the night. You're not telling anyone that something is wrong. From the outside, you look fine. You show up. You respond to messages. You finish what needs to be finished. You even smile when you're supposed to. But something is missing, and you can't explain it because it's not pain. Pain would be easier to understand. Pain would mean something is still alive inside you. This is different. This is when nothing reaches you anymore. Not the good moments. Not the bad ones. Not even the things that used to matter the most. You don't feel excited. You don't feel devastated. You just feel neutral all the time. And at first, you thought this meant you were finally at peace. No more chaos, no more emotional swings, no more suffering, just silence. But this silence isn't calm, it's absence. You sit in rooms that are supposed to feel meaningful and feel nothing. You achieve things you once dreamed about and feel nothing. You hear people laugh and you imitate the sound, but it doesn't come from anywhere real. It comes from memory, not from emotion. And the strangest part is, your life isn't falling apart. It's functioning, which makes it harder to explain. Because when everything is technically okay, you have no evidence that something is wrong, except this quiet emptiness that follows you everywhere. You're not suffering, but you're not living either. You're existing without the experience of being there. And maybe the scariest part isn't that you feel bad, it's that you don't feel anything at all. At some point, you stopped questioning it. You told yourself this is what stability feels like. This is what growing up feels like. Less excitement, less pain, less of everything. You became easier to manage, more predictable, more controlled. Nothing shakes you anymore. Nothing breaks you anymore. And secretly, you thought that meant you were strong, because pain used to reach you. It used to move through you without permission. A song could ruin your whole night. A memory could stop you in your tracks. A single sentence from the wrong person could stay in your body for weeks. You remember that version of yourself, the one who felt too much, the one who cared too much, the one who was too open, too affected, too alive. And you also remember how dangerous that felt, how exposed you were, how easily things got inside you and stayed there. So without realizing it, you began to close the doors. Not all at once, slowly, quietly. You learned how to detach, how to observe instead of feel, how to move through your own life like a visitor. And it worked. You became efficient, functional, untouchable. Nothing could hurt you anymore, but nothing could reach you either. And this is the part no one warns you about. When you stop feeling pain, you don't just lose pain, you lose everything that lives next to it. Joy, love, presence, meaning, they all exist on the same spectrum. And when you shut one down, the others fade with it. Not suddenly, but gradually, until one day, you look at your life and realize you're no longer inside it. You're just maintaining it. And the question that begins to follow you is quiet, but relentless. When did I disappear? And why didn't I notice it happening? You probably think this happened because something is wrong with you. Because somewhere along the way, you broke. You became weaker, colder, less human. That's the story people silently tell themselves when they stop feeling. They assume they lost something. They assume they failed to protect whatever made them alive. But the truth is, this didn't happen because you were weak. It happened because you adapted. Because at some point, feeling everything became too expensive. Not physically, but psychologically. There were moments, small ones, that didn't look important from the outside. A disappointment you never talked about. A rejection you pretended didn't matter. A phase of your life where you gave everything and nothing came back the same. You didn't collapse. You didn't scream. You stayed composed. You stayed functional. You told yourself, it's fine. And that was the moment something began to change. Not on the surface, but underneath. Because every time you said it's fine, when it wasn't, you taught yourself something. You taught yourself that your feelings were unsafe. That feeling deeply came with consequences. So your mind did something very intelligent. It reduced the volume, not all at once, just enough to help you continue. You still showed up. You still did what was expected, but you stopped arriving fully. Part of you remained somewhere else, somewhere quieter, somewhere protected. And the strange thing is, this worked. Your life became more stable, less dramatic, less unpredictable. You stopped being controlled by emotional waves. You became calm, reliable, resilient. People started trusting you more, depending on you more, because you didn't react the way you used to. You didn't break the way you used to. You became strong, but strength has a shadow. Because the same mechanism that protects you from pain also protects you from everything else. You stop feeling hurt, but you also stop feeling moved. You stop feeling rejected, but you also stop feeling chosen. You stop feeling grief, but you also stop feeling love in its full weight. Everything becomes lighter, but lighter doesn't mean better. Sometimes, lighter means less real. You notice it in moments that should mean something. You reach a milestone, and your reaction feels delayed, muted, like watching someone else's life through glass. You hear good news, and your mind understands it's good, but your body stays neutral. You say the right words, you perform the right expressions, but internally, nothing shifts. And you begin to realize you're not actually participating in your life. You're performing it. You're playing the role of someone who is present without feeling present. And this is where the real conflict begins. Because from the outside, everything still works. Your responsibilities are handled. Your routines are intact. You are not falling apart, which means no one sees the problem. And that makes it harder to admit, even to yourself. Because how do you explain the absence of something? How do you prove that something is missing when nothing is visibly broken? So you stay quiet. You continue. You assume this is adulthood. This is maturity. This is what happens when you grow up. You trade emotional intensity for emotional safety. You trade vulnerability for stability. And at first, it feels like progress. But over time, you begin to notice the cost. Life stops surprising you, not because nothing happens, but because nothing reaches you anymore. Moments pass through you without landing. Days blur together, not painfully, just quietly. And the most dangerous part is how normal it starts to feel. Because humans adapt to anything, even their own absence. You adapt to not laughing fully. You adapt to not crying fully. You adapt to existing in the middle, where nothing is extreme enough to wake you up. You become someone who is never too sad, but also never truly alive. And you tell yourself this is balance. This is control. But deep down, there's a question you avoid asking. Not out loud, but in the silent spaces of your life. When you're alone, when there's nothing distracting you, when there's nothing to perform, the question appears quietly, without accusation, without urgency, just curiosity. When was the last time I felt something real? Not something appropriate, not something expected, but something real. Something that moved through you without permission. Something that reminded you you were here, fully here. And sometimes you can't remember. Not because it never happened, but because it's been too long. And instead of panic, you feel acceptance, because numbness doesn't announce itself as danger. It announces itself as peace. It convinces you that nothing is wrong, because nothing hurts. But the absence of pain is not the same as the presence of life. And the longer you live in this state, the harder it becomes to imagine anything else. You forget what intensity felt like. You forget what emotional depth felt like. You forget what it meant to be affected by your own existence. And slowly, without realizing it, you stop expecting more. Not because you don't deserve more, but because you no longer feel connected to the part of you that wanted more. The part of you that hoped. The part of you that cared. The part of you that was willing to risk being hurt just to feel something real. That part didn't die, but it went silent. And in its place, something quieter took over. Something safer. Something that could survive without feeling anything at all. At first, you think numbness is something that happened to you, like an illness, like a defect, like something that arrived without your permission and stayed longer than it was supposed to. But numbness is not random. It's not a glitch. It's a decision. Not one you made consciously, but one your nervous system made for you a long time ago, because there was a version of you that felt everything. Too much. You noticed small changes in people's voices. You noticed when energy shifted in a room. You noticed when someone stopped loving you, even before they said it. You carried moments longer than other people did. You replayed conversations. You analyzed silences. You gave meaning to things most people ignored. You were open, and being open meant being wounded, not always dramatically, sometimes quietly, sometimes in ways no one else could see. You trusted someone and watched them become distant. You worked toward something and watched it collapse in your hands. You believed a feeling would last forever and watched it disappear without explanation. And every time that happened, your system learned something, not in words, in sensation, in association. It learned that feeling deeply was dangerous, not because emotions themselves were dangerous, but because of what followed them. Loss, rejection, disappointment, abandonment. So your system adapted, not by making you stronger, but by making you less open, less reachable, less affected. It built distance between you and your own emotional world, not to punish you, but to protect you. Because protection was more important than aliveness. And that's the part most people misunderstand. Your numbness is not your failure. It's your armor. It's the part of you that said, I will never let that happen again, even if it meant never feeling fully alive again. And over time, you stopped noticing the armor because you wore it every day. It became your personality, your identity. People described you as calm, stable, unbothered, strong. They trusted you because you didn't overreact. They relied on you because you didn't fall apart. You became the person who holds everything together. But no one asked what it cost you to become that person. No one asked what you had to stop feeling in order to survive. Because from the outside, armor looks like strength. But from the inside, armor feels like distance. Distance from pain. But also distance from joy. Distance from heartbreak. But also distance from love. Distance from chaos. But also distance from meaning. And slowly, you stop being touched by your own life. You watched things happen. Good things, bad things, important things. But they all landed the same way. Softly. Distantly. Like echoes. Instead of impact. And you told yourself, this is peace. This is emotional maturity. This is what it means to be in control. But control is not the same as connection. Because real connection requires vulnerability. It requires the possibility of being changed by what you feel. And numbness protects you from that. It protects you from being moved, from being shaken, from being broken. But it also protects you from being alive. Here's the truth most people never realize. Numbness is not the absence of emotion. It's the suppression of emotion. Your feelings didn't disappear. They were buried, stored, frozen, waiting, because your system believed you weren't safe enough to feel them. Not yet. And the strangest part is, even now, there are moments when something slips through, briefly, unexpectedly. You hear a song, and something tightens in your chest. You see a memory, and something stirs. You watch a scene in a film, and for a second, you feel something real. And then, it's gone. Your system closes the door again, not because the feeling wasn't real, but because the protection is still active, still guarding you, still doing its job. But this is the moment everything begins to shift. Because the fact that you can still feel it, even for a second, means something inside you is not dead. It means the part of you that feels still exists. It didn't disappear. It went into hiding, waiting for safety, waiting for permission, waiting for you to come back. So this is the midpoint most people never reach. They assume numbness is permanent. They assume this is who they are now. Someone stable, someone controlled, someone unaffected. But numbness is not your identity, your adaptation. It's not who you are. It's who you became when you needed protection more than aliveness. And adaptations can change, not through force, not through pressure, but through awareness. Because the moment you see numbness clearly, it stops being invisible. It stops being automatic. It stops being the only way you exist. And something else becomes possible. Not immediately, not dramatically, but quietly, slowly. The return, not to who you were before, but to who you were underneath the armor. The version of you that could feel, not perfectly, not constantly, but honestly. And the truth is, the numbness was never trying to destroy you. It was trying to save you. It just didn't know when it was safe to stop. So maybe nothing is wrong with you. Maybe this emptiness, this silence inside you, is not evidence that you're broken. Maybe it's evidence that you survived something your nervous system never fully resolved. Because numbness doesn't come from weakness. It comes from endurance. It comes from holding yourself together when feeling everything would have torn you apart. It comes from adapting when there was no other way to continue. And for a while, that adaptation saved your life. It helped you function. It helped you move forward. It helped you become someone who could exist without collapsing under the weight of everything you carried. But survival was never meant to be your final form. Armor was never meant to become your skin. Because armor cannot feel warmth. It cannot feel closeness. It cannot feel the subtle, fragile beauty of being alive. And maybe the goal was never to destroy the armor. Maybe the goal is simply to recognize it, to understand why it's there, to stop blaming yourself for needing it. Because the moment you stop fighting your numbness, something unexpected begins to happen. You stop reinforcing it. You stop treating it like an enemy. You stop adding shame to something that was only ever trying to protect you. And in that absence of shame, space appears. Small at first, almost unnoticeable, but real. You may not suddenly feel everything again. You may not wake up tomorrow overwhelmed with emotion. That's not how this works. Feeling returns the same way it left. Quietly, gradually, in fragments. A moment of unexpected sadness that doesn't scare you. A moment of unexpected peace that doesn't feel empty. A moment where you realize you are not just observing your life, you are inside it, even if only briefly, even if only for seconds. And those seconds matter because they remind you of something you forgot. You were never meant to live untouched by your own existence. You were meant to be affected, moved, changed, not constantly, not perfectly, but truthfully. The numbness may still be there, some days more than others. That doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean you're stuck. It means your system is still learning, that it doesn't have to protect you the same way anymore. It means something inside you is slowly beginning to trust again. Not the world, not other people, but yourself. Your ability to feel and survive feeling. And one day, without realizing exactly when it happened, you'll notice something simple. You'll hear a sound, and it will reach you. You'll see light, and it will stay with you. You'll feel a moment, and instead of disappearing, you'll remain, not watching it, not analyzing it, but living it. And in that moment, you won't feel numb. You won't feel overwhelmed. You'll just feel present. And that presence will feel unfamiliar, but it will also feel like something else, something you haven't felt in a long time, something you thought was gone, yourself. Because the truth is, the scariest thing was never that you couldn't feel pain. It was that you almost forgot what it meant to feel alive. And the fact that you're here, still listening, still searching, means one thing is already true. You're closer than you think. There is something no one tells you about numbness. It doesn't just silence your pain. It silences your direction. Because when you can't feel, you can't tell what matters. You can't tell what's right for you and what isn't. You stop choosing your life and you start maintaining it. You wake up, not because you're driven, but because you're supposed to. You continue, not because you're connected, but because you already started. You stay, not because it feels right, but because nothing feels wrong enough to leave. And this is how entire years disappear. Not in tragedy, but in neutrality. Not in chaos, but in quiet disconnection. You don't crash, you drift. This is the hidden cost of numbness. It doesn't destroy your life. It makes you absent from it. And absence is harder to detect because from the outside, everything still looks intact. But internally, something essential is missing. Not happiness, not success, not even passion. Presence, the sense that you are here inside your own moments, inside your own choices, inside your own existence. And when presence disappears, identity slowly follows. You stop asking yourself what you want. You start asking what makes sense, what's reasonable, what's expected, what's safe. And safety becomes your compass. Not truth, not aliveness, just safety. But safety has a ceiling. It can protect you, but it cannot fulfill you. Because fulfillment requires risk. Not external risk, internal risk. The risk of feeling again. The risk of caring again. The risk of being affected again. And that risk is what numbness was designed to avoid. This is why numbness feels like a loop. Because the very mechanism that protects you also prevents the experiences that would wake you up. You don't feel, so you don't move. You don't move, so nothing changes. Nothing changes, so you continue not feeling. And the cycle repeats, quietly, indefinitely, unless something interrupts it. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but consciously. The interruption begins with one realization. Numbness is not proof that your life is correct. It's proof that your nervous system chose survival over connection. And survival is only the beginning, not the destination. You were not designed just to endure your life. You were designed to inhabit it, fully, messily, honestly. But inhabiting your life again doesn't start with forcing emotion. It starts with noticing absence, without judgment, without panic, just awareness. The simple recognition that something inside you has been quiet for too long. Not dead, not broken, just quiet, waiting. Because identity is not something you lose all at once. It fades in pieces, in the moments you ignore yourself, in the moments you override yourself, in the moments you abandon your own internal signals for the sake of stability. And over time, you forget what those signals even sounded like. You forget what it meant to feel like yourself, not the version that functions, not the version that performs, the version that exists underneath all of that. But here is the truth most people never reach. The self you lost is not gone. It's preserved under the numbness, under the adaptation, under the armor, waiting for a moment when it feels safe enough to return. Not all at once, but in fragments. A moment of unexpected clarity, a moment of unexplained emotion, a moment where something inside you whispers, "This isn't it," not as criticism, but as invitation. An invitation to come back. And if you've been feeling numb for a long time, that invitation can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable, because numbness became your normal, your identity, your protection. But protection was never supposed to become your home. It was supposed to become temporary shelter. And maybe the fact that you're here, the fact that something in these words feels familiar, the fact that some part of you is still listening, means something important. It means the part of you that feels is not gone. It means the part of you that questions is still alive. It means the part of you that knows something is missing is still present. And that part of you is where everything begins again. Because the moment you realize you've been absent is the moment you stop disappearing. And what comes after that changes everything. Maybe nothing dramatic will happen after this. No sudden breakthrough, no emotional flood, no moment where everything makes sense again. Just this: awareness, quiet, uncomfortable, honest awareness. Because numbness doesn't end in noise. It ends in noticing how long you've been gone. Not physically, but internally. Noticing how many moments you lived through without ever arriving inside them. Noticing how much of your life you experienced from a distance. And this realization can feel heavy, not because it hurts, but because it's true. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped expecting your life to feel like yours. You settled for manageable, predictable, safe, but not alive. And yet, something brought you here. Not motivation, not discipline, something quieter. Recognition. Something in you recognized itself in these words. Not the version of you that performs, but the version of you that remembers. Remembers what it was like to feel without permission, to care without control, to exist without armor. That version of you is still there, not in the past, not lost, just buried under years of adaptation, years of survival, years of becoming someone you needed to be, instead of someone you chose to be. And the strangest part is, your life never stopped moving. Time never paused to wait for you to come back. It kept going, day after day, year after year, while you slowly disappeared inside it. But disappearing was never permanent. It was protective, and protection can be released, not forced, not rushed, but seen. Because the moment you see what numbness really is, it stops being invisible. And when it stops being invisible, you stop confusing it for who you are. You were never the numbness. You were the one carrying it. And carriers can put things down. So maybe nothing changes overnight. Maybe tomorrow feels the same, but something is different now. You see it. You feel the outline of something underneath the silence, something that never left, something that never stopped waiting. And one day, in a moment so ordinary you almost miss it, you'll realize you didn't disappear. You were just asleep.